so you've reported, obviously there was primaries in Georgia, also in Pennsylvania. There's going to be, I guess, another runoff between Dr. Oz and McCormick. So what has, in terms of the Republican side, what have you seen in terms of patterns, in terms of, are we uplifting Trump's picks and his, he's been vindicated, or are we seeing a break from the narrative of the 2020 was stolen election stuff?
Oh, you're seeing some Republican voters get tired of candidates who talk about that and only that. I think that can be a little bit overdetermined because I always start the clock back before Trump was the nominee. There are things that he's gotten every Republican Party in the hymnal talking about that they didn't talk about before him. And some of them, I think, a lot of people left agree with. And I was in Wyoming yesterday, as we were saying, and at several points in the rally, actually, at this big arena, there's a picture displayed that morphs together Liz Cheney and George W. Bush. And the point of that, and then Trump brings it up, Matt Gaetz via video brings it up, is the Cheneys are warmongers, the neoconservative wing. They don't say neoconservative, but they kind of say the hawkish wing that want to invade everybody and spend our tax money. That's not the Republican Party anymore. That's an evolution. I don't see anyone winning Republican primaries who says, you know what would be a great idea is sending more money to Ukraine. I don't. Right. That's been happening. But then you also have stuff like, this is the party of building the wall. This is the party of immigration restriction, which it was having debate on before. So there's very little disagreement between the Republicans winning primaries and Trump on anything super significant. I'm not saying 2020 is not significant, but that is kind of a deal breaker for a lot of Republican voters. If you say that Biden won fairly, if you say, but they can look past that if you're with Trump on all the other issues. It's become a very kind of European nationalist style right-wing party. I see that from primary to primary. Almost nobody's winning anything. Even incumbents who were pretty safe before down the ballot are losing these state rep races to people who say, "What have you done for us? What have you done for concealed carry? What have you done for sending National Guard down to the border?" Just the tests that Republican candidates are being asked to pass are all kind of Trump tests. And then you compare that with the Democrats. Nobody's really taking a guidance from Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden of what a Democrat is. Joe Biden endorsed Kurt Schrader, who just lost. Republicans have a figure controlling the party and driving it to the right, and Democrats are just kind of falling over each other, which they're pretty good at. I'm not sure what they're good at right now. They're very good.
It's so funny that you said earlier, like, oh yeah, the Democrats really, anyone who's trying to like take the party over, they're going to be resistant to that. And then you're like, oh, unless you're a fascist and you're running for the GOP platform, then they're like, oh my God, please take us over. We've been trying to say this out loud for a very long time. Thank you. And they did that with Trump. So I think what I hear you saying is, yeah, the 2020 stuff. And yes, Brad Raffensperger and Kemp won their primaries, handily beating Trump-picked candidates. But still, Raffensperger and Kemp are passing voter restriction laws that are doing effectively the same thing that will ensure a Trump victory in the future, even if they weren't able to hand him that victory in 2020.
Oh yeah, there are. So we'll go back to February 2021. Kemp more than Raffensperger, although Raffensperger implements it. He's the governor saying, "You're right. There were questions about 2020. We're going to pass this new law. There's going to be new restrictions. It's going to be easier to replace Democratic election officials, Republicans. All that stuff passes. Democrats vote against it, and then in this primary this month." A lot of Democrats, especially suburban Atlanta Democrats, who all said that stuff in last February, voted for Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger just out of necessity. They said it's either them or it's MAGA. It's MAGA guys. But you do see some willingness of Democrats to put up with the overall environment and the overall policies moving to the right and just taking a chance to, well, maybe we could stop this before it goes too long. The point you're making though about what they'll put up with is interesting because in Pennsylvania you had the candidate for governor there, Josh Shapiro, the Democrat, spending some money to help the most right-wing candidate win the primary. In Georgia, you did have Democrats voting for moderate's not a great word here, but voting for the non-MAGA, the election was stolen, Mike Lindell is right candidates.
Yes.
But in both cases, they're just kind of accepting that the Republican Party is moving right. Maybe they can throw up a block from time to time, but they're not really doing anything to move that train off the track. They're just kind of trying to maybe give some advice where the train should go. Put a couple. They're not
still going in the same direction.
Yeah, it's
anyway.
Still basically going in the same direction. That's the influence Democrats have at the moment.
Auschwitz is where the train is going.
I didn't say that, but yeah, okay.
in terms of Wyoming, then, what do you think about, Liz Cheney's chances? I think there's a lot of centrist Dems that are, and not even like, even myself, who's just like, honestly, yeah, there are shades of Republican, and neocons were awful, but also we never remember that Trump expanded drone strikes by fucking 400%. Hello. They never talk about that. But anyway, I'm like, no, we should have more Cheneys and Kissingers, even though I disagree with them on 99% of everything else. But what do you see? How do you see that race going?
Yeah, that's a tough one to do. What I was just describing in Georgia, just because Wyoming is very Republican. There are very few Democrats there. There are independents who can kind of go 50-50. But that's the entire Cheney survival strategy. Is there's her opponent, Harriet Hageman, who's endorsed by Trump, who spoke at this rally. There's a couple other guys on the ballot. Their hope is, okay, maybe the MAGA people split their votes. Maybe there's a few people who show up who we can convince, without being too loud about it, some Democrats to come and vote for Liz Cheney. And then maybe she holds on through this election. But that's just about it. And the Cheney campaign is not softening anything. Raffensperger was saying, okay, right, well, I'm gonna look for voter fraud. Sure, fine. She's really gone all in and saying, no, I'm gonna go down with the ship, investigating January 6th and attacking Donald Trump. So her only path to survival is like almost every Democrat in Wyoming. We're talking about tens of thousands of people, literally, that they all come over and they shift the electorate. That is very hard. She has 2 months to do it, but that's that race. Either that happens or she loses pretty badly.
NATO, any final question?
Yeah, I do have a question as we look ahead to the midterms. There's sort of this like narrative that people have about midterms that like, oh yeah, the opposition party tends to gain ground in midterms. My question is, why? People sort of act like it's like the fucking tides, but there's some logical mechanics that are behind it. And I wonder if you have some assessment about sort of what drives that dynamic and the degree to which those trends do or don't apply now.
Well, it's true that generally people 2 years into a presidency, most times, certainly this century, have been like grumpy, let's put it that way, about what's been going on. I was checking, when's the last time most Americans answered the Gallup poll and said things are going in the right direction? It was like 2 months after 9/11. The last time most Americans thought things are going in the right direction is right after a terrorist attack, when politics was kind of stopped. And Republicans were just kind of getting everywhere they wanted. Democrats are saying, here,
thank you, Al Qaeda,
Patriot Act, whatever's on the menu, you got it.
The good old days of 9/11.
Yeah, that's a factor. The factor that made Democrats kind of optimistic going into the cycle is just the president's party tends to be demotivated, demobilized, not vote. And they still think, but they thought definitely a year ago, well, look at this electorate. This is electorate that, the education gap is bad for us in lots of places, but the fact that voters with college degrees, voters who vote in every midterm election, have been moving towards us, that's good. Maybe we've lost some voters on the margins who usually skip midterms, but we can hold on to these guys. We can hold on to the suburbs. That has been a factor for them. And they'll melt down in places they can win like 2-1 in a presidential year. And I think they've figured out a lot of that. I mean, there's so much. I mentioned the money being spent on facts. So much money and organization in Democratic politics. They're not finding those voters. I mean, there are scared Democrats who are going to say they failed at everything, but I'm going to show up in because I need to fight for Roe, or I need to fight the fascists, or whatever your issue is. There's going to be people who think things are pretty bad for me, but I'll vote. I think they probably got more of those than they do in a typical midterm. They'd be just in better shape if people didn't think the economy was rotten and they weren't panicked about inflation. But those are the main reasons. People think things are bad generally. They have for 20 years. And usually it's hard to convince the president's party, like, hey, well, we told you 2020 or 2016 or whatever was the most important election of your lifetime. New election, most important election of your lifetime is this one.
Yeah.
Although I literally heard Trump say that yesterday. This is the most important midterm of your election. If you're tired of that phrase, just, I don't know what to tell you. That'll be in every election, but the party out of power is the one that's been better at scaring people into saying, this is it. Gotta vote. Yeah.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.